Hey readers, it's Rob Gowdy, Events Manager for Friends of the Hennepin County Library, and I'm back for the week one check-in for our first Great Friends Read Together, our classical book reading group. We are reading The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and we have completed chapters 1 through 7 for this week's check-in. Let's get started with the quote of the week. The quote I've chosen this week is from chapter 5 of The Secret Garden, and it goes like this. The big breaths of rough, fresh air blown over the heather filled her lungs with something which was good for her whole thin body, and whipped some red color into her cheeks and brightened her dull eyes. The reason that I chose this particular quote is I hadn't remembered from my previous readings of the book how very quickly after she arrives in Yorkshire at Misselthwaite Manor, Mary begins to change. I remember her being a bratty child, an unlikable child, a child that quite frankly does need to change, and I thought she was that way for a very large portion of the beginning of the book. But on this latest read, I noticed that she starts to change really shortly after she starts spending time in nature and out in the gardens and in the fresh air. And I think the reason this one really struck with me this time is because it's something we're all needing right now. I don't know about you, but I'm spending more time outside, walking, enjoying the sunshine, breathing in that fresh air because it's so important. And I think it's really doing something for us as a people right now, much like it did for Mary Lennox in this story. Next up is perhaps my favorite part of the check-in. We're going to dive deeper with background information and additional resources that help you expand your enjoyment of the text. This week, I'm going to focus on the background of the author and the locations of the book. I did a little research on Frances Hodgson Burnett and a few fun facts about her. She was born in England in 1849, but actually grew up in Tennessee and then spent the rest of her life bouncing back and forth between America and England. She wrote 50 books, most of which were actually for adults, not for kids. And The Secret Garden was written near the end of her career in 1911. And The Secret Garden is partially inspired by her rental of the Maytham Hall property in the English countryside county of Kent. And at Maytham Hall, she set up an outdoor study where she would write under the gaze of a tamed robin, not unlike the robin that accompanies Mary on her journey. I was also interested this week to learn more about British colonial rule in India. At the time that Frances Hodgson Burnett wrote The Secret Garden in 1910, India was actually firmly under the control of Britain. This period of governance, called the British Raj, lasted from 1858 until 1947. And during the British Raj, Indian nationals lacked the power and influence to have any say in government, as the British maintained a heavy military presence throughout the Indian subcontinent. At this time, India also suffered heavily during cholera epidemics that first ravaged the subcontinent and then spread throughout the world. The epidemic lasted from 1899 to 1923 and killed at least 800,000 people in India alone. So a little too close to home for us, the beginning of this story. After India, Mary travels to the Yorkshire Moors, and they're just a fascinating part of the world. When Mary first arrives, she's driving through the moors with Mrs. Medlock, and it's dark and bleak and unknowable, and the wind makes a low rushing sound that Mary actually thinks is the sea. So it's a very dark, twisted landscape that she's driving through. It's actually the perfect place for a story that is filled with mystery and the possibility of rebirth, as the moors burst into colorful splendor every springtime. This made this location very popular throughout English literature. It has actually been suggested that The Secret Garden was partially inspired by the earlier novel by Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, which I'm sure most of you have read. And if you start to think about the motifs of each, there's a little bit of overlap. A naive young woman, a gruff and unknowable master, and mysterious cries in the hallway. Slightly different twist, but very similar themes. So if you want to know more about any of these subjects, I have posted links to articles about each of them, and they are on our website, supporthclib.org/greatread. And now it's your turn to join the conversation. I have some weekly questions and discussion prompts to share with you. Prompt number 1. Share a quote or moment from chapters 1 through 7 that resonated with you. Why did you choose this passage? Prompt number 2. What impact do place and circumstance have on Mary's personality? How did British colonial India shape the Mary we meet in chapter 1? And how have the Yorkshire Moors and Misselthwaite and its staff begun to change her by chapter 7? Prompt number 3. Why does Mary respond so well to Martha? What characteristics of Martha's personality are responsible for awakening the gentleness hidden in Mary? Okay, those are your 3 discussion prompts, and you can join the conversation by heading to the Friends of Hennepin County Library Facebook page or by visiting our website, supporthclib.org/greatread. Navigate to the Week 1 discussion panel. There is a link to join the discussion in email. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Next week, we'll be reading chapters 8 through 14. Happy reading.